Clara Bennett had lived her entire life on the wide, open plains outside the small town of Dry Creek. The land was harsh, but she loved it. It was where she grew up, where she learned to ride horses before she could walk properly, and where she had taken over her father's ranch after he passed away. The ranch wasn't huge, but it was enough for Clara to prove herself. People in town often whispered about her because she had no husband and ran the ranch entirely on her own, but she didn't mind. She knew her worth and worked harder than most men in the area. Clara's mornings began early. The sun barely peeked over the hills when she was already up, feeding the horses, checking fences, and making sure the cattle were healthy. She wore simple clothes, a faded shirt, sturdy boots, and her long hair tied back with a leather strap. She was used to the chores, but even so, some days were harder than others. The land was dry and the work never ended, but Clara felt a deep pride in keeping her father's legacy alive. One afternoon, Clara rode into town to sell some cattle. She tied her horse near the saloon and walked inside. The place was noisy, filled with the smell of smoke, coffee, and the faint tang of whiskey. Men were gathered around tables, laughing loudly and playing cards. The saloon girl smiled at Clara and nodded politely. She had seen Clara in town before, but usually she preferred to stay out of gossip and trouble. As Clara made her way to the counter to talk business, a loud, familiar voice rang out. "Well, well, look who's here." Clara turned to see Tom Callahan, the rancher who lived a few miles outside of town. Tom was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face that seemed carved from stone. He had a reputation for being bold and reckless, often testing boundaries just for fun. Clara had known him for years, but they had never been close. He was one of those people who seemed to enjoy stirring trouble. "Good afternoon, Tom," Clara said cautiously. She didn't want any problems, just to sell her cattle and leave. But Tom had other plans. He leaned back against the bar, grinning, and called out loud enough for everyone in the saloon to hear. "I see my wife has come to town." The room went silent for a moment. Some men laughed nervously, unsure if he was serious. Others whispered and nudged each other, eyes wide. Clara felt her cheeks burn. She had always been independent, and the idea that someone could claim her as theirs without consent was both insulting and dangerous. "I'm not your wife, Tom," she said sharply, her voice steady but carrying a hint of anger. "That's not funny." Tom laughed, a deep teasing sound. "Oh, come on, Clara, don't be so serious. Everyone knows a woman like you could use a strong man to keep her company." Clara's eyes narrowed. She didn't need anyone to keep her company. She had her ranch, her animals, and her independence. She wanted the town to see her for her skills and strength, not as someone to be claimed in a joke. But Tom wasn't backing down. He leaned closer and shouted again, "I said she's my wife. If anyone here thinks otherwise, come say it to me." A few of the townsmen chuckled, some shaking their heads. Clara could feel the whispers rising like smoke in the room. She realized that this wasn't just about Tom being loud. He was challenging her, testing the town's respect for her, and trying to make everyone doubt her independence. Clara took a deep breath, trying to calm the anger that surged inside her. She had two choices: leave and let the rumor spread, or confront the situation head-on. She chose the latter. "Tom Callahan," she said firmly, walking toward him, "you've gone too far. I am not your wife. I am Clara Bennett, owner of Bennett Ranch, and I will not let you make a joke out of me or my name." The room held its breath. Some townsfolk whispered admiration for her courage, while others shook their heads, unsure what would happen next. Tom's grin didn't falter. If anything, it grew wider. "Well, well," he said, tipping his hat. "Sounds like my wife has a sharp tongue. I like that. But the question is, can she handle what comes next?" Clara's fists clenched at her sides. She hated that she felt a flicker of fear, but she pushed it down. She wasn't about to let Tom intimidate her. "You can try to embarrass me all you want," she said, "but I promise it won't work. I'll set the record straight one way or another." Tom laughed again, a mix of amusement and admiration. The townsfolk began to murmur, some impressed by Clara's boldness, others curious about what would happen next. Tom's stunt had worked exactly as he wanted. The whole town was talking. Clara left the saloon that day with a heavy heart but a determined mind. She knew the rumor would spread, and some people might never believe her. She walked to her horse, mounted it, and rode back to her ranch, thinking about her next move. She couldn't change what Tom had done, but she could control her response. Back at the ranch, Clara spent the evening checking her fences and making sure the cattle were safe. She worked quietly, letting the tension of the day fade into the warm glow of sunset. As she paused to look over her land, she thought about her father. He had always told her, "Clara, strength isn't about who you can fight. It's about standing firm when the world tries to tell you who to be." She repeated those words to herself, letting them sink in. The next morning, Clara rode into town again, this time with a plan. She needed to confront the gossip head-on and protect her reputation. She tied her horse outside the saloon and stepped inside, noticing that nearly everyone was watching her. The tension in the air was thick like the heat before a summer storm. Tom was there again, leaning casually against the bar, a smug look on his face. He raised an eyebrow as Clara approached. "Back for more, wife?" he asked with a smirk. Clara ignored his teasing and addressed the room. "Everyone here knows what happened yesterday. Let me be clear, I am not married to Tom Callahan. He has no right to call me anything. I am Clara Bennett, owner of Bennett Ranch, and I expect to be treated with respect, not mocked." A hush fell over the saloon. Some townsfolk nodded quietly, while others murmured uncertainly. Clara's voice was strong and steady, filled with the confidence that came from knowing who she was. She wasn't going to let anyone turn her life into a joke. Tom laughed, but it wasn't the same easy laughter from yesterday. He realized Clara wasn't afraid. He raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, Clara, you win this round. But don't think I won't be back to challenge you again." Clara's eyes flashed, not with fear, but with determination. "If you ever try to humiliate me again, Tom, I won't just speak out. I'll make sure the town sees the truth and you'll regret it." The saloon erupted into whispers and quiet applause. Clara had taken the first step in standing up to Tom, but she knew the battle wasn't over. The town's opinions could be cruel, and Tom's pride meant he wouldn't back down easily. But for the first time, she felt a sense of control over the situation. She wasn't a victim. She was a force to be reckoned with. As she rode back to her ranch that evening, the sun sinking low in the sky, Clara thought about what lay ahead. She had faced Tom, defended her name, and started to shift the town's view of her. But she also knew that Tom's challenge was far from over. The real test would be how she managed the coming days when whispers became stories, and stories became rumors that could either destroy her or make her stronger. Clara dismounted at her ranch and watched the wind sweep across the plains. Her cattle grazed peacefully, unaware of the chaos in town. She smiled, feeling the strength that came from hard work, courage, and the refusal to be treated as a joke. Tomorrow would be another day, and Clara was ready. No matter what Tom or the town tried, she would face it head-on, with her head held high and her heart unyielding. And as the night fell over the wide, open plains, Clara knew one thing for certain. She was not just a joke, and she would make sure everyone in Dry Creek understood that. The next few days were tense in Dry Creek. Every corner of the town seemed alive with whispers about Clara Bennett and Tom Callahan. People stopped her in the street to ask questions, some curious, some judgmental. Clara kept her head high, answering only when she felt it necessary. She had work to do, and she would not waste time on idle gossip. Yet deep down, she knew the time was coming when she would have to face Tom again. And this time, the challenge would not be a simple argument in a crowded saloon. Clara returned to her ranch each evening, tending to her cattle, repairing fences, and making sure her land was in perfect order. But even there, the echo of Tom's laughter from the saloon haunted her. He had a way of making everything seem like a game, but Clara knew better. She understood that if she wanted to reclaim her name and protect her independence, she had to be smart, brave, and deliberate. One morning, she woke earlier than usual. The sun had not yet touched the horizon, and the air was cool and crisp. Clara saddled her horse, tightening the straps, and rode toward town with a plan. She knew she could not ignore Tom or the town's curiosity any longer. The sooner she confronted the situation, the sooner she could put the rumors to rest. As Clara entered Dry Creek, she noticed a crowd gathering near the saloon. Men and women alike were whispering, eyes glinting with anticipation. Word had spread that she intended to settle the matter once and for all. Clara felt a surge of determination. She dismounted, her boots crunching against the dusty street, and made her way toward the center of the gathering. Tom Callahan was already there, leaning casually against the saloon wall, His hat tipped low, a smug grin on his face. "Well, look who's come to see me," he said, loud enough for the entire town to hear. "Are you ready to admit your place, wife?" Clara's eyes narrowed. She stood tall, her hands resting on her hips, radiating confidence. "I am not your wife, Tom Callahan. I am Clara Bennett, and I will not be made a fool of by you, or anyone else in this town." The crowd murmured in surprise. Some cheered quietly, others leaned in closer, eager to see how this confrontation would unfold. Clara knew she had their attention, and she planned to use it wisely. She had to show everyone that she was not just a strong woman, but a clever and determined one. Tom pushed himself away from the wall and stepped closer, his grin never fading. "You're brave, I'll give you that," he said. "But can you handle what comes next? Can you prove to everyone here that I'm wrong and that you're in control?" Clara didn't flinch. She took a deep breath and began speaking clearly, letting her words carry across the town square. "Everyone here knows what happened. Tom Callahan tried to claim me as his wife in a public joke. I will not allow anyone to think that is true. I work hard, I run my ranch, and I make my own decisions. No one has the right to speak for me, and I am here to make that very clear." There was a hush over the crowd. Clara's voice rang with confidence, and her words were sharp and precise. The townsfolk could see the truth in her eyes, and slowly their doubt began to shift. Clara's reputation as a strong, independent woman began to shine through the cloud of gossip Tom had created. Tom chuckled softly, shaking his head. "You've got spirit, Clara, I'll give you that. But are you ready to back your words with action?" Clara's heart raced, but she stood firm. "If you continue to disrespect me or try to humiliate me, I will not only speak out, I will make sure the town sees the truth." "This ends today, Tom." The crowd held its breath. Clara's courage and determination were clear, and the town could feel the power of her words. For the first time, Tom hesitated. He realized that Clara Bennett was not someone who could be intimidated or controlled. She had a mind of her own, and she was not afraid to use it. Tom's grin softened into a reluctant smile. "All right, Clara," he said, tipping his hat slightly. "You've got me this time. I can see that you're not a woman to be taken lightly." "I respect that." Clara didn't relax her stance. She knew better than to think the challenge was over completely. But she allowed herself a small nod. "Respect is earned, Tom, not given as part of a joke." The townsfolk began to clap quietly, then more loudly. They admired Clara's courage, her sharp mind, and her refusal to be humiliated. The story of Tom's joke transformed into a story of Clara's strength and intelligence. Even those who had doubted her began to see her in a new light. As the crowd began to disperse, Clara felt a wave of relief mixed with pride. She had faced the challenge, defended her name, and turned the situation to her advantage. The town's whispers had changed. What could have been a tale of embarrassment became a tale of respect and admiration. Tom lingered for a moment, watching Clara mount her horse. "You're tougher than I expected," he said quietly. "I think we'll meet again, but next time it will be a fair challenge." Clara's eyes met his, steady and unwavering. "I'm ready for that, Tom. But remember, I do not back down." She rode back to her ranch as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting the plains with warm orange and pink hues. The wind swept across the fields, carrying the scent of grass and earth. Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had faced a public challenge and emerged stronger. Her ranch, her land, and her independence were hers alone, and she would protect them fiercely. That evening, Clara tended to her cattle, checked fences, and prepared for the night. She reflected on what had happened in town and the lessons she had learned. She realized that courage was not just about standing up to others, but about standing up for herself. No matter the odds. She had faced ridicule, gossip, and a man who thought he could control her story, and she had won. The following days brought a quiet respect from the townsfolk. People greeted Clara with smiles and nods, no longer with whispers or smirks. Even Tom Callahan maintained a distance, but there was a subtle shift in his behavior. He no longer tried to provoke her, and occasionally he could be seen watching her from afar, perhaps learning a lesson in humility. Clara's life returned to its usual rhythm. She rode her land, tended her cattle, and worked on the ranch with the same dedication as always. But now she did so with a renewed sense of confidence. She knew that no joke, no rumor, and no man's arrogance could define her. She was Clara Bennett, rancher and independent woman, and she would continue to carve her path in the world, proud and unyielding. One evening, as the sun set over the hills, Clara sat on the porch of her ranch house watching the sky turn golden. She thought about the events in Dry Creek, the challenge she had faced and the respect she had earned. She smiled, feeling the peace that comes from knowing you have faced adversity and stood firm. Her land stretched out before her, calm and endless, a reflection of her own strength and determination. Clara knew that life on the plains was never easy. There would always be challenges, and there would always be people who tried to test her limits. But she had learned that no matter the trial, she could face it with courage, wit, and integrity. And as the stars began to twinkle above, Clara felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had proven to the town, to Tom, and most importantly to herself, that she was not just a joke. She was a woman of strength, intelligence, and dignity, and no one could take that away from her. And so, life on the Bennett Ranch continued, filled with the daily rhythms of hard work and quiet triumphs. Clara rode her land with pride, her cattle grazing peacefully, the wind rustling through the grass. She had faced a public challenge and emerged victorious. The town of Dry Creek would not forget her courage, and Clara herself would carry the lessons of those days forever, ready to face whatever came next, with unwavering determination.